The smell hit the ambassadors before they even entered the throne room. It wasn't the scent of incense, roses, or polished marble. No, it smelled like something had died, been left in the sun for a week, then rolled in rotten eggs. But this wasn't a battlefield or a plague ward. It was the daily aura of King James I of England, the same man who authorized the King James Bible. He hadn't bathed in years, drooled constantly because his tongue was too big for his mouth, and wore clothes so infested with lice that courtiers swore they could see them leaping around. And here's the kicker. James was one of the more normal ones. Because when you give someone absolute power, endless wealth, and a palace full of servants too terrified to tell them they're disgusting, they don't become wise philosopher kings. They become bizarre, delusional, and sometimes downright monstrous. In the next few minutes, we're diving into history's strangest royal habits, quirks so unhinged they make modern celebrities look tame. Kings who thought they were made of glass. Emperors who turned their horses into politicians. Monarchs who laughed themselves to death. And rulers so revolting their own stench cleared entire rooms. By the end of this list, you'll see why unchecked power almost always leads to unchecked insanity. So buckle up, because the kings we're about to meet didn't just sit on thrones. They turned them into stages for the weirdest, most disturbing performances history has ever seen. When people picture royalty, they imagine marble palaces, jeweled crowns, and grand speeches to adoring subjects. What they don't imagine is a French king walking around convinced he'd shatter like a wine glass if someone brushed against him. Yet that's exactly what Charles VI of France believed. Known as Charles the Mad, he suffered from the glass delusion, a medieval mental illness. He had iron rods sewn into his clothing to stop himself from breaking. He refused to let anyone touch him, wouldn't sit down too quickly, and sometimes even forgot he was king. Courtiers literally had to remind him of his own throne. Imagine running one of Europe's most powerful kingdoms while terrified of being bumped into. But Charles was far from the only one to plunge into absurdity. Fast forward to Russia and meet Peter III, one of the most embarrassing rulers in history. Picture the emperor of the world's largest country staying up until 3 a.m., forcing his wife, yes, Catherine the Great, and his entire court to play with dolls. He'd act out battles with squeaky voices, complete with sound effects, and demanded everyone join in. When a rat chewed through his toy soldiers, he staged a full military trial. The rat was court-martialed, sentenced, and then pardoned for showing discipline. And while he ruled Russia, he wore a Prussian uniform and spoke German. It's no wonder Catherine arranged to have him removed, officially by illness, but many whisper assassination. Now let's jump to Egypt and meet a king who made stealing into an art form. King Farouk, one of the wealthiest monarchs in the world, loved pickpocketing. He once stole Winston Churchill's watch during a meeting. Diplomats frequently left state dinners missing wallets, medals, or jewelry. Farouk had trained himself to be a master thief, bragging about his hand of the thief. And if kleptomania wasn't enough, Farouk's obsessions pushed him into absurdity. He loved the colour red so much he owned hundreds of red cars and outlawed anyone else from owning one. If he spotted one on the street, it was seized immediately. He once shot out the tyres of a diplomat's car for daring to be red. He also hoarded one of the world's largest pornography collections, insisting it was educational. Meanwhile, his weight grew so extreme that chairs had to be modified for him. At restaurants, staff removed the arms from chairs so he could fit. These kings remind us of one uncomfortable truth. Power doesn't make people noble. It turns oddities into policy. Charles thought he was made of glass. Peter played with dolls like a child. Farouk pickpocketed his allies and banned red cars. These weren't private quirks. They shaped the lives of entire nations. And we're only getting started. The next kings didn't just live strangely, They died in ways so absurd you'd think they belonged in a comedy sketch. You might think kings would die in battle, sword in hand, with trumpets blaring. But some of the most powerful men in history checked out of this world in ways so ridiculous they could be stand-up routines. Take King Martin of Aragon. In 1410, Martin sat down to dinner and devoured an entire goose. Bloated, he called for his jester. The jester cracked a weak joke about a deer stealing figs and hanging by its tail from a tree. That's it. That's the joke. Martin laughed for 3 hours straight until he suffocated and died. Imagine being the jester. Your entire job is to amuse the king, and one bad joke literally kills him. If you think that's absurd, wait until you meet Christian VII of Denmark. His reign was a circus act fueled by severe mental illness. He slapped people randomly, foreign dignitaries, servants, even wedding guests. He ran through his palace smashing furniture. He forced ambassadors to play leapfrog in the throne room. And when he wasn't leaping over tables at banquets, he was indulging in personal activities so obsessively that doctors prescribed him a special chair to prevent injury. Oh, and he once declared his dog a cabinet minister. Imagine being ordered to follow Minister Fluffy. Then there's Caligula, the Roman emperor whose name is still synonymous with madness. He didn't just love his horse Incitatus, he gave it a marble stable, jeweled collars and servants. He invited the horse to dinner, poured it wine, and planned to make it a consul of Rome. Imagine losing a promotion to a horse. But that was just the warm-up. Caligula also dressed up as gods and demanded people worship him in costume, sometimes as Jupiter, sometimes as Venus. He built a floating bridge across the Bay of Naples just so he could ride across it in Alexander the Great's stolen armour. And then there's Ludwig II of Bavaria, the king who thought he was living in a fairy tale. Obsessed with Wagner's operas, he built castles like Neuschwanstein, the inspiration for Cinderella's castle, and used them like stage sets. He'd host elaborate dinners for long-dead monarchs, with servants forced to serve empty chairs and refill untouched goblets. He even floated in a shell-shaped boat in an artificial cave, dressed as a medieval knight. Imagine being the servant keeping a straight face while your king toasts Marie Antoinette's health, centuries after her death. These kings didn't just rule, they blurred the line between monarchy and farce. Their lives and deaths remind us that sometimes the throne wasn't a seat of power. It was a comedy stage, and the world was forced to watch. But in the final part, things stopped being funny, because some kings' bizarre habits weren't amusing at all. They were deadly. Up to now, the kings on this list might seem like tragic clowns, strange, ridiculous, even laughable. But absolute power doesn't just create absurd habits. Sometimes it unleashes horrors. Take Ibrahim I of the Ottoman Empire, better known as Ibrahim the Mad. After years imprisoned in the cage for princes, he became sultan in 1640 and spiraled instantly. He obsessed over fur, covering walls, ceilings, and even his clothes with it. But his darkest fixation was women. Ibrahim ordered all 280 concubines of his harem drowned in the Bosphorus because he suspected infidelity. One survivor swam to shore and told the world of the massacre. That wasn't eccentricity, it was mass murder. China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, was no less terrifying. Obsessed with immortality, he consumed mercury elixirs, slowly poisoning himself. His paranoia drove him to build tunnels connecting 270 palaces and execute anyone who revealed his location. He burned books, buried scholars alive, and filled his tomb with rivers of liquid mercury. He wanted history to begin with him, even if it meant erasing everything else. Then there's Adolf Fredrik of Sweden, who didn't kill others but managed to kill himself spectacularly. In 1771, After a grotesque feast of lobster, caviar, herring, and champagne, he ate 14 cream buns for dessert. His stomach gave out, earning him the title, the king who ate himself to death. Silly? Yes, but also a reminder of how indulgence can kill. And finally, Henry VIII of England. His festering leg ulcer made him reek of death. His paranoia drove him to execute wives and friends, and his gluttony swelled him to over 400 pounds. By the end, he was too fat to climb stairs or ride a horse without machines. When his coffin burst after death, his fluids spilled onto the floor, licked up by dogs. The man who reshaped England's religion ended as carrion. From eccentric to grotesque, these kings prove one truth: unchecked power warps the human mind. Whether laughing themselves to death, promoting horses, or drowning hundreds, they show us the darkest secret of monarchy, that when no one dares to say no, madness rules the throne.